Rachel Emerson is my name. I am 47 years old. For more than 2 decades, I have called this tranquil street in Oregon my home. The same maple trees donning their golden attire in October. The familiar blue mailbox, its corner chipped, remains untouched by my attempts at repair. The familiar brick walkway meanders toward a house steeped in an unsettling hush. I once believed that routine offered a sense of security. The familiar was preferable to the discomfort of transformation. Yet recently it seems as though time is merely passing by. My husband, Mark, holds an executive position in a field related to numbers, perhaps finance or mergers. I once grasped its essence. Or perhaps feign it. Yet, as time passed, his craft transformed into his lifeblood. What about me? I transformed into the gentle refuge he sought after. Cozy, recognizable, simple to overlook. We do not engage in conflict. We refrain from flirting. We reside as 2 volumes resting side by side on the same shelf. Once devoured, now collecting dust in quiet companionship. Both of our daughters are currently attending college. This implies that the house is even more serene. Excessive emptiness. Excessive reminders abound. The hours are occupied by laundry, lists, lemon tea, and those long walks that remain unspoken. I make sure to maintain a polished appearance. Golden locks meticulously styled. A hint of color on the lips. Comfortable yoga pants paired with cozy cardigans that convey a sense of calm assurance. However, I find myself in a different position. I feel myself slipping away. Yet, it appears that no one is aware. It was one fateful afternoon in early June. The Nelsons returned to their familiar abode across the street, their summer retreat, just as they always do. I had anticipated their arrival. I was caught off guard by. It was he, their child Caleb. The most recent memory I have of Caleb is from when he was just 17. Slender and lanky, sporting braces and clutching a skateboard, constantly discarding crumpled chip bags upon their lawn. At this moment, he stands at the age of 22. With a strong and commanding presence, smooth and free of stubble, adorned in a white t-shirt that embraced his chest as if it were destined to remain there. He emerged from the U-Haul, a single bag slung over his shoulder, sunglasses perched atop his head. I recall pondering, when did the youthful visage of boys begin to take on the stature and presence of men? That very afternoon, I found myself outside, feigning the act of sweeping leaves that were perfectly content where they lay. A method to escape the sensation of stagnation. He gestured with a wave. Hello. Are you Mrs. Emerson? A smile graced my lips. Rachel is doing well. His smile came effortlessly, as rays of light pierced through the overcast sky. I'm not sure if you recall our previous encounters. I do, I replied, taken aback by the resonance of my own words. There was a time when your bike would rest in our driveway. He let out a hearty laugh. I am guilty. We engaged in a light conversation, the kind that flows effortlessly. What he was engaged in at this moment, a gap year following college. He had returned, spending the summer with his family, with no plans in sight. He inquired about my well-being. I mentioned to him that I was simply at home, engaging in the familiar routines that mothers embrace when the children are away, and the hours stretch endlessly. He nodded as if he grasped the concept. Perhaps he truly did. He graciously volunteered to assist in pruning the rose bush that had become somewhat unruly. I replied, of course, why not? The following morning he arrived, gloves in hand, sunglasses resting atop his head, cradling 2 iced coffees. I thought we could both use some fuel, he remarked. It had been months since I last indulged in iced coffee. Mark exclusively purchases dark roast beans, crafting his brew to a level of bitterness that one could almost chew. Yet there was a hint of vanilla in Caleb's coffee, with just the right amount of cream to evoke a sense of indulgence. We toiled together beneath the warm sun. His hand extending with the garden shears. I grasped the stems firmly, ensuring they remained steady. He inquired about my daughters, reflections on the books that resonated with me, concerning the melodies that resonated from the speaker on the porch. I was unaware of just how much time had passed, given that individual at such a tender age. Truly heard. At one moment I found myself chuckling. A remark he made about unintentionally cutting off half a bush during a summer job. I cast my gaze aside. He observed me intently, not in a childish manner, not in the manner of a neighbor, yet akin to an observer witnessing an event he was never meant to see, and felt an irresistible urge to keep observing. I cleared my throat. It seems there's an area that hasn't been addressed. He blinked as if emerging from a deep slumber. Then he nodded, returning to the task of trimming. Yet I sensed it, the glimmer, the transformation, and the pain it left in its wake. As the evening unfolded, I observed him from behind the glass, perched on the Nelson's porch, earbuds nestled in, head tilted back against the railing. He appeared serene, unfazed by the chaos around. 22. And yet, in some inexplicable way, more alert than I had experienced in years. That evening, I retired to my room long before Mark returned. He sent a message that read, "Extended dinner. Don't stay up for me." I did not. I reclined in the shadows, contemplating the beauty of roses, chilled brew, and the way Caleb uttered my name as if it held significance. Rachel. Not mother. Not darling. Not babe. Simply, Rachel. It marked the initial occasion in several months. I drifted into slumber, before shedding any tears. At dawn the following day, I tended to the garden, giving it the nourishment it craved, sooner than expected, not out of necessity, but from a yearning to encounter him once more. I reassured myself that it was merely innocent. It was not. Not completely. Caleb arrived later that afternoon. This time no gloves. Merely a worn-out pair of sneakers, a simple white t-shirt, and the familiar ritual of the same iced coffee order. "You enjoy it sweet, don't you?" he said. I certainly did. I had kept that to myself. Yet he recalled it all the same. "The final roses have been pruned away. It ought to have taken just 20 minutes. However, it required us almost an hour. Due to our continuous conversation. Because I continually discovered reasons to linger nearby." He shared his thoughts on Arizona. How the heat rendered everything almost dreamlike. How he had ended things with a girl just before graduation. He found himself at a crossroads, uncertain of the path he was meant to take in life. I admitted that I hadn't either. I found myself almost double his years. He grinned at that. Not out of sympathy. Yet he comprehended. Suddenly, out of the blue, he declared, "Have you ever sensed that everyone has progressed, while you find yourself standing still?" I hesitated before responding. I merely cast my gaze upon him. The sunlight caressed his collarbone, the delicate scar resting just above his left eyebrow. The brightness in his expression was not a reflection of youth, but rather a testament to his liberation. "Each day," I murmured. That afternoon we remained untouched. Yet our hands continued to brush against one another. Within the confines of the clippers, the garden hose, the vessel of refreshing lemonade. With every instance we were both aware. In every instance silence enveloped us, with neither of us daring to break it. Mark returned home that evening. Delayed. The familiar aroma of aftershave mingled with a subtle hint of hotel soap, permeating the hallway. He pressed his lips to the crown of my head, his gaze elsewhere. "I'm exhausted," he murmured, fading into the shadows of the staircase. I lingered at the staircase, my gaze fixed on the spot where he had disappeared. For the very first time, I found myself pondering the sensation of a kiss by an observer who truly witnessed me. The following day, Caleb arrived with his laptop in tow. He mentioned that he required assistance with a particular matter. I presented him with a glass of iced tea. Seated at the kitchen table, it was just the two of us, enveloped in a quiet intimacy. He was nearer than necessary. As I gestured towards the screen, our arms lightly grazed against each other. And at this moment, he remained close, not retreating. My breath hitched. His hand lingered on the table, fingers tapping softly in a rhythmic dance. And I promise, within the serene confines of that kitchen, amidst the shimmering reflections of the screen, and the gentle melodies emanating from the speaker, a sensation of change washed over me. It felt as though time itself had come to a standstill, paused in anticipation, anticipated, yet we remained still, remained silent, just lingered in that peculiar, throbbing silence. where all was imbued with energy, and nothing had transpired as of yet. He departed a few minutes later. He mentioned that he had to take care of an errand for his mother. His voice carried a relaxed ease, yet his gaze remained fixed, as if he were reluctant to leave, as if he were uncertain about whether he ought to. That evening, I found myself in the bathroom, gazing at my own reflection. My visage appeared more delicate, feeling more energized. I brushed my fingers against my cheek, curious if he had observed the same detail that caught my attention. Perhaps, a radiant light was starting to emerge once more within me. In an instant, the distance that separates us, within the garden, within the culinary space, floating in the atmosphere, no longer seemed so expansive. It was as if an ending lingered just out of reach. When Caleb visited again, he presented a peach cobbler crafted by his mother. She mentioned to share it with you. He grinned, presenting the foil-wrapped dish to me. And I remarked, I'll likely consume it all right here regardless. I chuckled and gestured for him to enter. The air conditioning transformed the house into a realm apart, serene, tranquil, unblemished by the heat of summer. We gathered at the kitchen island, forks poised, with the cobbler lying invitingly between us. It was a delightful concoction of stickiness, sweetness, and delightful chaos, and in some way deeply personal. At one moment, he leaned closer to gently remove a trace of peach syrup from my cheek. His thumb grazed my skin. The caress was the gentlest of whispers, yet it seared. I remained still. He didn't either. Simply that moment of stillness. An eternity in a fleeting moment. The sort that implies we are both aware. He eventually withdrew, cleared his throat, and averted his gaze. Yet all had transformed. Following that, he began to appear more frequently. Not on every occasion. Yet, it happened frequently enough that I began to leave the back door ajar. Commenced the preparation of an additional glass of lemonade. I began to brush my hair twice in anticipation of his arrival. On a particular day, he assisted me in reorganizing the garage. The air was thick with humidity, making the labor feel even more arduous. We were drenched in sweat, sharing laughter, hoisting boxes that had remained undisturbed for ages. At that moment it occurred. He lost his footing. I made contact, seized his arm, and in some inexplicable way, we found ourselves in each other's orbit. Uncomfortably near. Excessively quiet. My hand rested gently upon his chest. His fingers lingered just above my waist. Silence enveloped us. There was no necessity for that. His breath brushed against my neck. Experienced the rise of his chest beneath my palm. And then his fingers brushed against my skin. It was no mere coincidence. However, with purpose. A single hand, steady and inviting, rests gently at the curve of my back. The other grazes my jaw, just a whisper of contact. It was as if he posed a question, silently urging me to respond without uttering a single word. I allowed him to continue. I was unable to. In that instant, all the arguments against it, each boundary I vowed never to breach, fuzzy, dimmed, fell into silence. He inclined closer. Do not kiss me. Yet to bring his forehead to rest against mine. His voice carried a hushed timbre. Unsteady. You occupy my thoughts endlessly, he confessed. I shut my eyes, for the simple reason that I was unable to deceive. I couldn't either. That night slumber eluded me. I reclined in bed next to my husband, with his back facing away. His breath flowed deep and steady. All that occupied my mind, it was the manner in which Caleb had gazed at me. I wasn't exactly his neighbor. I wasn't any older after all. Yet, I felt as though I belonged to him. Only for a moment. And how that second seemed more authentic. More than anything I had experienced in years. Caleb was absent from my sight for 2 days following that encounter in the garage. And I despised the extent to which his absence weighed on my mind. I found myself wandering near the windows, feigning the adjustment of already perfectly aligned curtains, gazing across the street as if awaiting a delivery that would forever remain elusive. My husband was present at home during those 2 days. The house buzzed with chatter that held no significance. The meal was ready and waiting. The dishes have been cleaned. News observed. He occupied the seat opposite me at the table, his jaw working steadily as he chewed, his gaze fixed elsewhere, posing questions that seemed to hold no interest for him, regardless of the responses they might elicit. I acknowledged with subtle nods at the appropriate moments, grinned at the perfect moment, yet my mind was consumed by thoughts. The warmth of Caleb's hand rested gently on the small of my back. The gaze he cast spoke volumes, a silent declaration that you were far from unseen. I had lost touch with who I truly was. Perhaps I had finally embraced my true self, and there was no turning back. On the third day he sent a message. Are you back? I gazed at the message, lost in thought for what felt like an eternity. My fingers lingered in the air. Subsequently inscribed. Indeed. A minute passed, and then a knock echoed at the back door. I unsealed it before the chance to reconsider slipped away. He stood there in a worn gray shirt, hair slick with summer's warmth, fingers restless in his pockets. We exchanged no greetings. We lingered in silence, two souls burdened by a weight too great for trivial conversation. He crossed the threshold. The door clicked shut behind me. For a brief instant we lingered in the kitchen, the stillness vibrating with an electric tension. At that moment he uttered the words, I cannot proceed with this if it remains solely a thought in my mind. My gaze fell upon him, truly observed. The elegant line of his jaw. His chest rose and fell as if he had been holding his breath throughout the entire day. His eyes expansive, uncertain, yearning. I murmured, it's not. He advanced a single step in my direction. I remained still. One more step forward. Next yet another. As he stood before me, my hands quivered with anticipation. I ought to have declined. I should have told him to leave. Yet I refrained. For there exists a place within me, beyond the devoted spouse, beyond the weary matriarch, beyond the devoted caretaker. She was a woman who had not felt the warmth of genuine affection in what felt like an eternity. That woman was in desperate need of sustenance. He pressed his lips against mine, gentle in the beginning, somewhat wary, as if he was reluctant to shatter my spirit. Yet I leaned in. Response provided. In an instant we found ourselves drawing nearer to one another. Not driven by desire, yet born from a place of urgency. A bond so intimate that it speaks volumes. I perceive your presence. You should understand that you remain in my thoughts. We navigated to the couch, clumsy, hushed, and filled with a sense of urgency. Each caress unveiled a new world of discovery. Each exhale, a revelation we lacked the courage to voice. It transcended the confines of age. It was never a matter of defiance. It revolved around the essence of recognition. Entirely. Out of the blue. Unchangeably. In the stillness that followed we remained there, enveloped in quietude. The sun sank gracefully behind the trees beyond. Shadows ascended the walls, akin to secrets seeking refuge. He traced a finger delicately along the inner curve of my wrist, the very place my husband overlooked. You radiate warmth, he murmured. I inclined my head in agreement. I can't recall the sensation of that anymore. We lingered in that moment for some time. There are no guarantees. There are no regrets. Simply inhale, feel the flesh, and embrace the unsettling tranquility that follows. When you realize that a transformation has marked you for eternity. As he finally rose to depart, he gazed at me and remarked, there's no need for complications. I inclined my head in agreement. Although I was already aware of it, we promised ourselves we wouldn't go down that path once more. It was merely a fleeting instant. An error. A momentary slip. Yet we were deceiving ourselves. We were both aware of it. On the morning of his departure, I found myself unprepared for any farewell. I reassured myself that I could do without it. It was for the best. Neater. More straightforward. However, in all honesty, I lingered in anticipation. Not near the window. Not with optimism painted across my features. Yet softly, as my breath lingered, trapped in the depths of my throat, like a figure poised in a threshold, invisible to all but herself. He failed to arrive that morning. No message sent. There was no knock at the door. At approximately 11 a.m., I stood by the kitchen sink, observing as the Nelsons' car departed. He occupied the back seat. the head tilted, gazing out the window, our gazes intertwined, if only for a fleeting moment. He made no gesture of acknowledgement, yet he cast his gaze in my direction, and that gaze, it conveyed all that needed to be expressed. Thank you very much. You will always remain in my memory. This held a significance beyond words. As the vehicle navigated the bend, it gracefully transitioned into the next street, and then he vanished. I lowered myself onto the cool kitchen floor, leaning against the dishwasher. My hands rest gently in my lap, and tears streamed down my face. Not born from sorrow, not even from a place of remorse. Yet I was aware. The end had come. It's not merely the situation with Caleb, yet the fragment of my being that had existed in quietude for such an extended period. That aspect refused to retreat into obscurity. The coming weeks seemed unusual. Mark came back from yet another conference, tossed his suitcase into the hallway, and inquired about dinner plans. I offered a smile, uttered salmon, and observed him as he strolled away. He failed to notice the new haircut I had gotten. There was no inquiry about my whereabouts earlier that day. Failed to notice the fresh spark within my gaze. The one I was unable to feign previously and cannot conceal now. In the quiet hours of the night, I would find myself seated on the porch, a glass of wine in hand, observing the stars emerge from behind the pines. I often reflect on how Caleb gently tucked my hair behind my ear. The manner in which he breathed my name, reverent and soft. The tremor in his hands during our first touch, as though he too sensed we were unveiling something both taboo and hallowed simultaneously. It was not love. Not quite. It was something diminutive, yet in a way it felt immense. It was under observation. It was desired. It was becoming known. Even if only for a single summer. I chose not to pursue him. Failed to put pen to paper. I refrained from searching his name online. Some things, the genuine ones, are simply not destined to endure. They are designed to rouse you from slumber, to awaken the essence of your soul, to remind you that you are more than just a wife, a mother, a neighbor, or a specter. You remain a woman, a being adorned with flesh, and a deep yearning, and warmth, and a heart that continues to brave the possibility of being shattered. Occasionally, as I stroll past the rose bush he assisted me in pruning, as I glide my fingers along the sharp thorns, a smile graces my lips. For that was his true essence. A sharp prick. Exquisite. Perilous. Surprising. Truly remarkable and impossible to forget. The neighbors remained blissfully unaware. My husband remained oblivious. The world continued its relentless rotation. Yet I transformed. Not in a manner visible to anyone, yet in a manner that would forever linger in my senses.